Christmas!
Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, one more little festive special for you before we wrap up for the holidays. As we did last year, we're going to finish up 2021 with a run up north to visit Santa Claus. Christmas is of course fast approaching. We know that Santa's sleigh is ready to go. Unfortunately, however, there's been a few last minute issues on Santa's production line, and it's become apparent that he's actually come up short in terms of the number of toys he's got ready for delivery. Of course, this is completely unacceptable, and Santa's elves have actually been tasked, therefore, with outsourcing some last-minute deliveries before the big night. So, who can you turn to on the 24th of December at such short notice, offering an expeditious delivery service on quality toys at a very reasonable price? You might be thinking FedEx, you might be thinking UPS, you may well be thinking DHL. Of course, so the elves have turned to none other than Trotter's independent traders. Getting several thousand toys into the back of a three-wheeled van and up to Lapland in only a few short hours was going to be a little bit tricky, so as you can see in front of you, Trotter's independent traders have gone and procured none other than the Douglas DC-6 for the task. The aircraft departed empty out of London City this morning. Now you may be wondering why it wasn't carrying the emergency supply of toys. Never one to shy away from a decent profit, Del Boys actually opted to route via Tallinn, picking up some of Estonia's very finest quality children's toys en route. So we now find ourselves on the ground in Tallinn. Grandpa's down the back, he's continuing to load up the toys. And we've got Rodney doing the walk around. As you can see, the weather outside is none too cushy at the moment. Our flight today then, once we've had the toys loaded on board, we're going to be taking the aircraft from Tallinn up towards Rovaniemi, of course the home of Santa Claus. The flight time should be around 2.5 hours. The weather on the ground here isn't too flash, but things should improve en route, and it should actually be quite a nice afternoon for our arrival into Rovaniemi itself. All up, we'll be carrying 8 tons of toys and about 9,200 pounds of fuel, giving us a takeoff weight of around 81,400 pounds. A last little note before we depart: some of you may already be aware, but we're actually going to be running a little bit of a prize giveaway in conjunction with the flight. Firstly, to celebrate the festive period, and also as a little thank you for the channel recently hitting 10,000 subscribers. If you want to take part in the prize giveaway, you can find more details down in the video description below. But essentially, follow along the flight, there'll be a few questions for you to answer as we go. If you then email me with the correct answers, you could be in with a chance of winning yourself the Microsoft Flight Simulator add-on of your choice. Anyway, as I say, more details down in the video description below, and please feel free to enter. Anyway guys, that's enough talking. It sounds like Grandpa's just finished loading the last of our Estonian toy shipment. Let's head back up to the warm, dry flight deck of the DC-6, and hopefully Rodney can join us shortly, and we'll head up north to see Santa.
Lovely jubbly, pucker thing, you know, no mucking about.
So welcome to the cockpit of the Trotter's Independent Traders DC-6. Pretty snowy morning here on the ground still in Tallinn, so we'll get the aircraft started up as quick as we can before we start icing up. We've just got all of the cargo on board, we've closed up the cargo doors, we'll have our automatic flight engineer run through the before start checks.
Voice recorder. Tasted. Oil coolers and cow flaps. Water in position. Fuel and fluids. Checked. Pressurization. Set. Manifold and duct pressure. Checked. Radios. Checked. Doors and hatches.
So the cargo doors are closed up, we'll confirm that with the ground crew. We've just closed up the cabin door, stairs are retracted.
And the doors are up for breath.
Closed. Door warning lights. Out. Gear pins. Removed. 3 on board. Seat belts and pedals. Adjusted. Throttles. Set to idle. Propellers. Forward at 3.
Norseman 5 Quebec, contact Tower, 1 minute.
Before start checks complete. Start engines.
Okay, so we're all set for the start. We'll be starting the number 3 engine first. We have the mixture lever set to auto rich. Mags are on both. The number 3 engine is selected. Boost pump is set to low. And we have good fuel pressure, so we'll engage the starter.
videre 3 Yankee, contact tower, hva med reporter?
9. 12.
There's our 12 blades, so the boost coil and the primer can go on.
Northman 744, god formiddag, Emergent, direct north to DC-6 QNH1021.
And despite it being a pretty cold day outside, looks like we had a good start there on the number 3. We'll make sure we keep the RPM below 1000. Start the number 4 next. So same as before, mags on both, engine start selected to number 4. Boost pump can go to low. I'm going to engage the starter.
3. 6. 9.
Green start is 0 in contact tower, 1194.
12.
And a good start there on the number 4. We'll just come back on the throttle slightly there. We're creeping up above 1000 RPM on the number 3. Temperatures and pressures there looking pretty good. The oil temperature obviously still coming up. Pretty cold outside as we've said. So good start on the number 4. We'll start the number 1.
Good morning, green start is 08, established by that 0 minus 7 point. Green start is 08,
3. 6. 9.
Northman 5 on Quebec, ready for immediate. Northman 5 on Quebec, line and
So good start there on the number 1. Oil pressure has come up. And lastly the number 2. And we'll hit the starter.
3. 6.
Northman 5 on Quebec, green 100 degrees. Do not run into the line, clear for immediate takeoff.
12.
And a good start there on the number 1. Once again the oil pressure is checked. Oil temperature just starting to creep up there on the number 3 and 4. Still pretty low there on the number 1 and 2 at the moment. Anyway, we have 4 good starts. The fuel boost pumps can go back to off for the time being, as can the engine start selector. And we'll have the automatic flight engineer run through the after start checks.
Start selected, boost pumps. Off and off. Battery switch. Flame entry. Generators and inverters. Checked and on. Emergency lights. Bombed. Ground power. Removed. Off to start checks complete.
Okay, so we do have a good start. We'll just get the windshield heat on there, as it's obviously pretty cold outside. We don't want to ice up. We'll go with between 0 and 10 degrees Celsius for now. The outside air temperature down around -5 currently. We've already got the cabin heat on. We'll take the airfoil heater and the prop de-ice on as well. And before we taxi, we'll just get the aircraft set up for our departure. So we're initially going to be tracking off the Tallinn VOR, which is 112.2. We'll tune that up. And then we'll be tracking inbound towards the Helsinki VOR, which is 114.2. We'll tune that up in the standby on nav 1 and in the primary there on nav 2. Outbound heading will be 355, so we'll set that up on the OBS. And we have 355 set. Looks like we're already picking up the VOR. We're showing 0.8 DME to run there. Altimeter is set. The after start checks are complete. And we're currently on the stand here at Mike 43 at the moment, so we'll just make a left turn straight out onto the main taxiway, and then we'll join at Charlie for the intersection departure off runway 08. Park brake can come off. Slowly come up on the throttles, just to get the aircraft on the roll. You can already see Charlie, that's just off tar 10 o'clock.
Vi er tilbake til Alfa 1. Ja, men da kjører du egentlig til Alfa 1 videre og holder klar Alfa 1 da.
looks like there's a bit of a snow shower passing through the area at the moment. Pretty poor visibility. So just turning left onto the main taxiway. And as I say, we'll just continue straight ahead now onto holding point Charlie. We're all clear on the right. And the same on the left. Bring the aircraft to a stop at the holding point. We'll carry out the rest of our before takeoff checks. As usual, it looks like the sim taxiways don't match up there versus the real world, so we're actually at holding point Alpha. So bring the aircraft to a stop. Park brake can go on. We'll just adjust the throttles again to maintain just below 1000 RPM. So power is set. Oil pressure is looking good there. Oil temperatures come up nicely now on the number 3 and 4 engine, just coming up on the numbers 1 and 2. We'll have the automatic flight engineer run through the before takeoff checks.
Burst pumps. Burst pumps on low. Fuel selector and crossfeed. Main tanks and crossfeed off. Autopilot and carbine. Off and cold. Hydraulic system. Down, forward, pressure and quantity checked. Okay. Flaps 20.
So we have flaps 20 selected, just waiting for the flaps to run out there.
Flaps set 20. Windows and turbine.
Just coming back again on the throttles.
Closed and on. Controls. Gas lock released. Free. Potato.
Definitely going to want that pitot heat on for the departure.
Mixture and cowl flaps. Bridge unlocked. Set. Transponder. On. Landing lights.
Just while we wait for the landing lights to run out there, we'll do a quick flight control check.
Hello again, Northbound 51 Quebec 2001, climbing 6000
Okay, so we are ready for the takeoff. Obviously we can't see much in terms of traffic and what's coming down on final. We'll assume we've been given takeoff clearance by air traffic. So the park brake is off. Again, just gently coming up on the throttles.
Green side into 08. First right, contact it out on 216.
And just easing the DC-6 out towards the runway. Slight tailwind off runway 08, but that's what's been assigned to us by air traffic. Conveniently, it's also a much shorter taxi for us. And we'll just bring the aircraft to a stop, we'll come on to the brakes. Okay, so as you can see, there's still quite a bit of snow passing through the area at the moment. We'll take the wipers on for the departure. And just before we go, we'll check the airframe. Looks as though we're clear of any contamination, so all good there. Takeoff weight is 81,400 £, so it'll be a dry takeoff, and we'll have the automatic flight engineer run the takeoff dry procedures.
30 inches stabilize. 30 inches stabilize.
Just feeding in the throttles, we'll stabilise at 30 inches on the manifold pressure initially. Just holding the aircraft on the brakes.
Northbound 51 Quebec, turn right heading 180.
So it's 30 inches. Engine temperatures and pressures look good.
Stabilized. Cowl flaps. Cowl flaps. Cowl flaps set. Full power, please. Going full power.
And coming up to full dry power, which is 53 inches. There's 40 inches, so we'll release the brakes. And we'll let the flight engineer manage the throttles. We're looking for a V1 of 84 knots. VR is going to be 102. Power is set. And there's V1. And VR coming back on the yoke. And we're airborne. So a picture of around 5 degrees nose up. We want a climb rate of around 500 feet per minute initially. So trimming for that. The gear's coming up. I'm going to let the speed come up to 165 knots before we increase our rate of climb. And the flaps are coming up as well now. We'll maintain runway heading till 1,000 feet. We'll get the gyro pilot in. Obviously not really weather that you want to be manually flying in. And coming back to METO power now. There's 165 knots, so we'll maintain a rate of climb to maintain our speed.
Radar, good morning, Vidra 3 November Yankee 2300.
Vidra 3 November Yankee, good morning, Roger. Identify climb flight level 170.
And the engineer now bringing the engines back to climb power up through 1,000 feet so the gyro pilot can come on. I'm going to engage the mechanical clutch. We'll start our turnout towards the north.
Level 170, Vidra 3 November Yankee.
As I say, we're looking to track outbound on the 355 radial from Tallinn initially.
Norseman 744, descent 4,000 feet, clear ILS 09. Norseman 51, Quebec, continue with Polaris 131.1.
So the flight engineer's got the wipers off for us. We'll come on to heading around 340 to intercept the radial. And climb power is set. Temperatures and pressures looking good. And the speed looking good for the moment. Outside air temperatures just coming back through -10, so we'll ramp up the heating there a little bit on the windshield and the radome. And we'll just reduce our climb rate slightly there. It looks like the speed's just starting to fall off through 165 knots.
1211, Norseman 12 Quebec,
Vidra 3 November Yankee, clear the right turn direct off left.
Just coming up on our desired heading, so we'll roll wings level.
Right, Norseman, Vidra 3 November Yankee.
And we've just cleared the first layer of cloud. Looks like we're just passing over the motorway at the moment. Airfield somewhere off at our 9 o'clock, but you obviously can't see that with the current weather conditions. Looks like we've got some sort of refinery down there on the left. RMI needle showing 350 off the Tallinn VOR currently. We're just coming up on 6 DME from the station. So we'll keep an eye on that for the intercept. And the climb speed looking good. Just coming back into the cloud layer, so we'll leave the anti-ice systems on for now. Getting a fairly nice climb rate out of the aircraft here. We're doing about 1,100 feet per minute rate of climb.
Fløydrix, da må dere kjøre klar direkte i asfalten når dere kommer.
Looking to climb up to 12,000 feet. We've got the flight altitude set there on the pressurization system. Cabin altitude still more or less sea level at the moment, but we're expecting to see that. And just keeping a good eye on that OBS spar to make sure that we don't skip through the radial outbound from Tallinn. Already picking up the Helsinki VOR as well. We've got 50 miles to run there, so we'll stay on the Tallinn VOR till we're about 25 miles outbound. And you can just see the tops of the clouds. Shouldn't be too much long before we're clear of those, and then we can get the anti-ice systems off. Once again, we'll just check the airframe. Looks like we're still nice and clean at the moment. Shortly coming up on 5,000 feet, so another 7,000 feet to climb. And just skipping in and out of the tops of the clouds currently. 9 miles from the station now, still not showing any movement there on the OBS bar just yet, but the RMI is still showing 350 more or less. And the OT now minus 15 degrees, obviously the temperature continuing to decrease there as we climb. But again, the climb speed looking good, doing a nice vertical speed. Looks like maintaining 1,100 feet a minute is about right in terms of our 165 knot desired climb speed. Fuel flow a little bit higher there on the number 3 engine by the looks of things. We'll keep a good eye on that. And through 6,000 again, just creeping out of the clouds. A little bit of a lump ahead of us, so we will leave the anti-ice systems on for the time being. There's 11,000 feet, one to go. We'll go with the Sims transition altitude, so we'll leave the altimeter at its current setting for the cruise. I'll just keep a really good eye now on the altimeter as we climb. Gyro pilot doing a really nice there of maintaining the radio outbound. And 28 miles now to run inbound towards Helsinki. So we can actually switch over between the two VORs. We'll just come back into gyro pilot momentarily. And we'll go to 114.2, that's Helsinki. And you can see we're still looking good there on the radial, so we'll come back into localizer. We'll start reducing our vertical speed. And as soon as we hit 12,000, we'll go into altitude hold. And there's altitude hold. So keep a good eye on the instruments there, making sure the gyro pilot levels us off, which it looks like it's doing. We'll just maintain the power setting until we're up through about 200 knots, and then we'll have the automatic flight engineer carry out the cruise checklist. And we can tune up now the Halley VOR on standby nav 1, which was 115.2. And we'll tune that up now on nav 2. Doesn't look like we're picking up the station just yet. Okay, we do have the DME, 115 miles to run there. Obviously though we'll maintain Helsinki until we're overhead the station, and roughly equidistant between Helsinki and Hali. There's 200 knots, so we'll have the flight engineer carry out the cruise checks.
Set cruise power, please. Setting cruise power.
Ja, da skal vi koste litt mer på det nå. Ja, nå har du første høyre, en Grandad 26.
Hello, first start parking 35.
Cruise checks are complete.
Okay, so the cruise checks are complete. The automatic flight engineers set cruise power. Again, that number 3 fuel burn just slightly higher than the rest, but nothing too offensive at this moment in time. We're doing about £600 an hour on each engine, so £2,400 an hour. And we've got about £2,000 in each main tank at the moment. So about 3.5 hours of flight endurance. Anyway, once again, pretty solid layer of cloud here at the moment. As usual though, we'll head outside the aircraft, enjoy the majestic Trotters Independent Trading DC-6 as we head our way up north in towards the Arctic Circle and Rovaniemi.
Norseman 5 on Quebec, contact tower, 1 with them. And videre 300 Yankee, contact tower, 1 with them. Tilbake til Alfa 1. Ja, men da kjører du egentlig til Alfa 1 videre og holder klar Alfa 1 da.
Ja, det var Johan 4 eller 4, bare på Mike 2. Jeg skulle ha jobbet litt på P-meldingen her når jeg krysser tida og jobbet litt på det.
Johan 4, kryss tida her.
Ja, for jeg var krysset tida her, så jobbet på P-meldingen fra Johan 4 til 4.
So welcome back to the flight deck. The sun just beginning to set here as we approach our top of descent. We need about 5 miles per 1,000 feet we have to lose. Rovaniemi's more or less down at sea level, so we've got about 60 miles that we need for the descent. And I'm going to add a little bit of fat on there as well. Obviously the DC-6 doesn't like to slow down in a hurry. So we're going to call our top of descent 80 miles. We've got about 3 miles left to run. And we're going to be descending back into the cloud. The outside air temperature at the moment still minus 25 degrees, so we'll get the airframe heating and the prop de-ice on in preparation for entering into the cloud. Our temperature there just having a little bit of a moment. That's the Rex Weather Force weather, I presume, updating. Anyway, close enough to 80 miles to run now, so we'll start our descent. We'll come out of altitude hold And we're looking for a descent rate of 1,000 feet per minute on the gyro pilot. And as we descend, we'll brief for the arrival. Overall, at the moment, the weather actually looking quite nice into Rovaniemi. Currently, it's 328 on the wind, so we'll be expecting the VOR approach for runway 03. Cav OK conditions, so the VOR approach should be fine in terms of visibility and cloud base. If the weather does deteriorate, then we'll swing around onto runway 21 for the ILS. Temperature minus 16 degrees, so pretty chilly, and the QNH 1020, we'll set that now as we're in the descent. We do have a tempo of 1,000 meters in broken fog and broken at 100 feet on the cloud base, so obviously that's not going to be any good for the VOR approach, and probably we're not even going to be able to manage the ILS with those conditions. If we do need to divert, we've got Kemi as our alternate. That's just out to the southwest of Rovaniemi. Anyway, as I say, we'll discuss more about that as we go. So we'll just increase that vertical speed slightly. We really want to be aiming for 1,000 feet per minute. And we'll leave the power on for now. We'll start reducing the engine power once we come through 10,000, maybe even a little bit lower today. Anyway, as I said, for now, planning on the VOR approach, runway 03. We'll brief that. So it's Rovaniemi, VOR runway 03, plate 13-1. It'll be VOR 117.7, which we've already got tuned up there on nav 1. Final approach course will be 022. We'll have to tune that up later on. I'm still tracking inbound on the radial at the moment. Aerodrome elevation 643 feet. So a little bit above sea level, but as I said, more or less at sea level for our descent calculations. MSA is 2,400 feet, so we can descend down to 2,400 once we're inside of 25 miles. And we'll be descending onto the VOR approach at 2,400, starting our descent at 6 DME. Down to an MDA of 1020, we'll just set that there on the ADF as a little bit of a reminder. I like to use the ADF sometimes as a little bit of a tool to remind myself, so there's 1000, we'll call it 1100, the sake of being conservative. Not much around in terms of terrain, again just a slightly higher aerodrome elevation than usual. Weather we've already discussed, but overall quite nice conditions actually at Rovaniemi, and you can see the cloud base clearing up there a little bit as well. Alternate we've already discussed, that's Kemi. We need 2,200 pounds of fuel for the diversion. And we've currently got about 4,400 pounds on board, so we should be arriving with plenty extra. I did plan, as we discussed during the introduction, an extra half an hour's worth of fuel just with that tempo on the weather. Anyway, landing on runway 03, so we'll be vacating off to the right. Obviously no auto brake on the aircraft. We'll use the beta range on the props. And vacating off, we'll try for hotel. We might have to come off at Charlie and backtrack towards the parking area. So the briefing complete, just coming down through 9,000 feet. We've got 67 miles to run there at the moment. 9,000 feet, that means we need 45 miles to run, plus our 20 extra, so we're looking good on the profile. Speed's still creeping up there. We're nearly up at 240 knots, but obviously we can go up to 250 below 10,000. So again, we'll leave the power on for now. We'll have the flight engineer carry out the descent checks very shortly though. And coming up on 5,000, so we need 25 miles, expecting to see 45, and showing 46. So again, the profile looking decent. And I do find that it's good to regularly update the profile in the DC-6. It's, as I said, an aircraft where it can get away from you pretty quickly. You'll find yourself a little bit high and a little bit fast and unable to correct the situation. No speed brakes, of course. Anyway, the sun already starting to set in this part of the world. You can see once again we've got the almost full moon there. Just coming up on around 20 to 1 local time, so not too many hours of daylight. And Rovaniemi more or less inside the Arctic Circle, so that's certainly to be expected. But overall, with the sun setting there, it should make for a rather beautiful arrival into the airport, and hopefully we'll still have enough daylight conditions to actually see a little bit of the scenery as we go. Just checking the cabin pressurisation. The cabin altitude now back at sea level, and the delta pressure there come down to around 2 psi. So the cabin pressurisation system working nicely. Outside air temperature just coming up on minus 15, or just 3 minus 15 now. No visible moisture around, so icing not really a concern, but we'll keep an eye on the temperature nonetheless. And shortly coming up on 3,500 feet. So we'll just reduce our vertical speed. And we'll keep a good eye on our altimeter. We'll make sure we level off at 3.5. Again, being visual, not quite so critical, but nonetheless that's the highest sector on our approach inbound. RMI showing 010 now, so we'll keep a good eye on that. And in fact we'll just reduce that intercept angle slightly so that we've got a little bit more time to catch things. So it's 3,500. We'll go into altitude hold once again on the gyro pilot. And we'll come on to a heading of about 350. Just by reducing that intercept angle, it means we've got more time to actually keep a lookout for the OBS bar there. Otherwise it's quite easy to just fly straight through. And we'll go wings level once again. So we'll say we're at 4,000 feet, again erring on the side of caution. That means we need 20 miles to run. So we should be seeing 40. We're back at 37 now. And as I say, we'll start reducing our speed, so we'll get the flight engineer to carry out the descent checks.
26 inches, please. Setting 26 inches.
Ground incorporate that, good morning, Roger. Descend Tallinn South at East on a QNH 1021.
Engine burn is low. Low. Descent checks are complete.
Okay, so that's the descent checks complete. The speed bleeding back nicely for us now. And the RMI now showing 015. It's about another 7 degrees to go before we're on the radial inbound. You can see the OBS bar just starting to move there actually. So once again we'll just shallow up our intercept. As soon as we're on the OBS bar we'll go back into localizer mode once again on the gyro pilot. And showing 33 miles to run now. So just waiting on 25 before we continue our descent. Speed now back at 190 knots. We can start configuring anything below 174. Still a little bit far out at the moment to be thinking about configuration though. So really we're just keeping an eye on that OBS bar and the DME at the moment. Whichever comes first we'll either intercept the radial or we'll continue our descent. Okay, so we just come up on our 022 radial. We've gone back into localised mode on the gyro pilot. And descending now down to 2,400 feet. We'll do that fairly slowly. We've gone for a descent rate of just a couple of 100 feet per minute at the moment. Just to avoid having that speed coming up again too much. And 20 miles to run. So again, we're pretty low compared to a typical jet profile, but feeling quite comfortable here in the DC-6. You can actually just about make out the airfield off at our 11 o'clock. Probably going to be pretty tricky to make out for you guys though. Just see the runway lights. Looks like the VR approach is going to have a slightly offset from the runway. So far the gyro pilot doing a nice job of maintaining the radial. And just come out through 3,200 feet. Just increase that rate of descent slightly. We want to be slowed down and have the landing checks out of the way before we start our descent at 6 miles. So doing about 500 feet per minute now on the rate of descent.
Grand 456, ready from Alpha B, confirmed.
So the plan is we'll level off at 2,400. That should be well before our 6 miles. A couple of miles before we reach our top of descent for the approach, we'll get the landing checks done and out of the way. Fortunately, Rex once again not doing a great job there with the weather conditions. The sim was well off in terms of the live weather, and Rex doesn't seem to be doing a much better job. It did at least get the overall conditions right, but definitely having a few issues there with the pressure setting. Bit of a shame. Obviously weather is something that really still needs sorting in the sim. So 2,800, 400 feet to go. You probably see the runway a little bit more clearly now, almost off the nose, just out, as I say, around our 11 o'clock position. Anyway, we'll take out the automatic flight engineer for a minute. We'll take over control of the engines. Just jumping up a little bit there as I match up my throttles with the aircraft position. And we'll come right back on the BMEP there. Again, just to help that speed bleed off. Showing about 13 miles to run. So we've got about 7 miles until we start our descent. Levelling off shortly, so again that should give us a nice level segment, let that speed bleed off, start configuring the aircraft. And ground speed currently 170 knots. So that means we need about 800 feet per minute on the rate of descent. We'll update our calculation though once we're actually back at our approach speed. So back into altitude hold. Keeping a good eye on that DME. And just waiting for the speed to be below 174 and then we'll carry out the landing checks. As you can see, even with the aircraft level and the thrust all the way back at the moment, the DC-6, as I said, really not an aircraft that likes to slow down in a hurry. Anyway, it's 170, so we'll carry out the in-range checks first.
Cooling turbine. Normal. Fuel booster pumps. On low. Fuel tank selectors. Mains on. Crossfeed off. Hydraulic bypass valve. Down. No smoking signs. On. In-range checks complete.
And we'll move straight on to the landing checks.
Flaps 20. Setting flaps.
Get those flaps down, get some drag.
Flaps set. Mixtures rich, please. Auto rich. Mixtures set. Gear up and down, please. Gear up and down.
So just waiting on 3 greens from the gear. There's 7 DME, so another mile will start the descent. And there's our 3 greens.
Gear down and locked, 3 greens, props, 2400 RPM. 2400 RPM set. Cal flaps, plus 3 degrees. Cal flaps set. ADI. ADI off. ADI is off. Landing lights. Speed good, extending lights. Lights extended and on. Carbine. Carbine called, set call. Before landing checks complete.
Okay, so the landing checks are complete. We have the gear down, 3 greens, flaps 20 at the moment. We're doing 100 knots over the ground, which means we need 500 feet per minute on the rate of descent, but it looks like we're a touch higher at the moment, so I'm just going for around 600 feet. Speed coming back nicely, we'll keep configuring, so we'll just keep taking the flap. We'll start coming up a little bit on the power now. We'll keep 120 on the speed more or less till short final.
Screen for Alpha 6, do you need Alpha 1 or ready from Alpha 3?
And we'll go full flap. So we have flaps full, gear down. Landing checks are complete. Looking reasonably good on the profile, just showing a touch high at the moment. We'll take out the autopilot, we'll fly the rest manually. Looks like the aircraft actually levelled us off there, not quite sure why that was. Anyway, we've caught it in time. We'll get that descent rate coming up again. We'll go for around 700 feet per minute just to get us back on profile. So just keeping good on our airspeed. Showing 4 whites there on the Pappy, but again, plenty of distance to correct that. Looks like we're just coming back onto profile now.
Line up in the federal line.
And at the moment it feels like there's a slight crosswind out from the right. According to the real world METAR, it should be out from the left. And the aircraft getting ever so slightly bumped around, a little bit of evening turbulence it seems.
Calibration 1, 2, vi har 2 stykker som driver de-avhengere, videre ground handling og aviator, så jeg vet ikke hvem du vil hjelpe, ja.
4556, wind 0800, 2 knots, runway 09, clear for takeoff.
Letting that speed bleed back to the approach, which is 104 knots. And we've got 2 reds, 2 whites now on the Pappy, so profile looking good. Just come below our minima, obviously we'll continue.
Calibration 1, 2, start up route, QNH 102. Northern 9 Whiskey Bravo, 50 Yankee Kilo to the
We'll definitely take beta on the prop, obviously with the runway being pretty heavily contaminated at the moment. Brakes aren't going to be a whole lot of use to us. And just dipping slightly there on the profile, so correcting that. Coming off the power. Holding the aircraft off.
Oh, cushy.
There's touchdown. Come up to around 30 inches on the props. And try and vacate at the next right. Okay, so we'll just get ourselves nice and slowed down for the turn. Obviously both the runway and the taxiways by the looks of it are fairly contaminated here at the moment. We want to avoid skidding. Anyway, we'll just clear the runway and then we'll have the automatic flight engineer carry out the aft landing checks. So taking the taxi nice and slowly. Pretty tricky to make out the lead-in lines here for the bay, but get ourselves parked up roughly in line with the gate. So the aft landing checks are complete. Looks like the landing lights are still on, we'll take those off. Just to avoid blinding the ground crew. And looks like we've got Santa just off there at our 1 o'clock. Anyway, just for the sake of seeing the scenery a little bit better, we're going to park pretty square onto the terminal building here. Looks like we should come in at slightly more of an angle in reality. So onto the brakes, the park brake can come on. Engine's looking good and we'll have the AFE carry out the parking checks.
Parking brake is set. Cut engines.
Skyline 4, 556 to approach 180 Southern.
Approach 186, Skyline 4, 556 Southern.
6 Charlie, taxi, Juliet Yankee, holding them in 0 miles.
Okay, we have 4 good rundowns, we'll close the throttles. Mags are off, as are the inverters. Beacon and the signs have gone off. And the radios.
Parking checks complete. Airbags secure.
So the aircraft is now secure, we'll get the cargo doors opened up very shortly. Just coming up on 1 PM local time, so our toys should be off the aircraft and delivered to Santa well ahead of time for his evening departure. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our run up north to see Santa Claus. The toys delivered well ahead of time, they should be making their way onto Santa's sleigh as we speak. I have heard that some of the lithium batteries in those things are a little bit of a fire hazard. Probably nothing to worry about, but I certainly hope that Santa has a robust cargo fire protection system fitted to his sleigh. Anyway, as always, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. As ever, a huge thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support throughout the year. Once again, it's very much appreciated. And on that note, thank you to each and every one of you throughout the year. It's been a real pleasure bringing you content. Very satisfying to see the channel grow and develop. I hope that you all have a brilliant Christmas in whichever way you see fit, and I look forward to seeing all of you again in the new year. It's time to get this DC-6 turned around and headed back towards London, so wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.
What a plonker you really are, Rodney!